You ever get the feeling like adults are acting more and more like kids these days? Like everywhere you look, it's, I don't know, like everyone's stuck in some kind of neverland.
Yeah,
Huh.
I think a lot of people can relate to that.
It's not just me.
No, not at all. We're actually going to be diving deep into this whole idea of societal infantilization
Yeah.
today.
Infantilization, huh?
Yeah, it's a pretty fascinating concept. And your sources for this deep dive suggest it's impacting a lot of areas of society.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Well, like everything from how our economy works to like our ability to handle these big global issues that we're all facing. Kind of scary when you think about it.
Okay, so maybe we should start by defining this whole infantilization thing. One of the sources I was reading talked about how the traditional stages of life,
Mm-hmm.
you know, childhood, adulthood, old age, they're all kind of getting blurry these days.
Yeah, the lines are definitely getting a little fuzzy.
The source actually uses some pretty strong language. They say childhood is like disappeared and that adulthood is basically just forced adolescence.
That's a powerful image. And it really makes you wonder if these clear-cut life stages were ever really a thing, or if maybe they've always been in flux depending on culture or economic pressures or whatever. What do you think?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, things are always changing, right?
Mm.
But there's this other idea from the source that I found really interesting. It's about how consumerism is actually driving a lot of this infantilization. They talk about this archetype of the eternal teenager that marketers are obsessed with.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, just think about how much marketing is aimed at teenagers and their spending habits. It's huge. And the source is arguing that, in a way, adults are being kind of regressed to this younger demographic to keep the economy humming.
So instead of focusing on like actual needs, the market is creating all these like imaginary desires.
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically. It's like this constant chase for the next shiny object, We're stuck on a treadmill of consumption. And that raises a lot of questions about, is this sustainable?
Right. And what does it do to us as individuals? Like, are we losing sight of what really matters when we're so focused on consuming and staying young?
That's the big question, right? And this is where I think the work of this sociologist, Zygmunt Bauman, becomes really relevant. He talks about this concept called liquid modernity.
Liquid modernity.
Yeah, so basically it means that all those institutions that used to provide structure and stability in our lives, things like family, religion, community, they're all becoming less influential.
So it's like we're losing our footing.
Exactly. There's this constant sense of uncertainty and anxiety.
I can see how that would lead to this whole infantilization thing. When the world feels chaotic and unpredictable, it's tempting to want to retreat into a simpler mindset.
Yeah.
Kind of like a defense mechanism.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it. And it's why marketers are so good at tapping into those desires. They offer us these products and experiences that promise to bring back that sense of wonder that we had as kids, a way to escape adulting for a while.
It's like we're all collectively yearning for Neverland or something, where we can just play and consume without all the burdens of the real world.
And that has huge implications for how we view aging, right? Like, think about it. Old age used to be respected for its wisdom and experience.
Right.
Now, it's often seen as a burden, something to be feared.
Yeah, we've definitely lost something there. We don't seem to value the contributions of older generations the way we used to.
The source actually argues that every economic system constructs the elderly to fit its needs. So in a society like ours, where youth is prized above all else, it makes sense that aging would be seen as a negative thing.
That's a pretty depressing thought. It's like we're trapped in this cycle of instant gratification. And it's affecting every part of our lives, from how we see different life stages to our ability to even face reality head on.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. But, before we go too far down that rabbit hole, I think it's worth asking, is there anything positive about this shift toward a more fluid approach to life? Like, could there be some benefits to being a little more playful, a little less rigid in our thinking?
That's a great question. I mean, we don't want to be a bunch of humorless robots, right?
Yeah.
There's got to be some middle ground.
Exactly. And I think that's what we need to explore further. How do we find that balance between embracing the joy and wonder of life while still taking responsibility for the important issues that need our attention?
Because if we don't find that balance, it seems like we're setting ourselves up for even bigger problems down the road.
I agree completely. But before we dive into those potential problems, maybe we should look at how this cultural shift is actually manifesting in the world around us. Because I'm seeing examples of this infantilization everywhere.
Me too. And you know what? The source actually points out some really interesting ones.
Well, like, look at how political discourse has become. It's so simplified. Like, it's designed to appeal to our base emotions instead of, you know,
Yeah.
encouraging real debate.
Yeah, it's all sound bites and slogans. And don't even get me started on our obsession with superhero movies and all these nostalgic reboots. It's like we can't handle reality anymore, so we just escape into these fantasy worlds.
Right. And even fashion is reflecting this trend. Like, the lines between adult and teen clothing are so blurred these days, I can barely tell who they're marketing to half the time.
Okay, I'll admit, I've totally fallen for some of that nostalgia bait myself. But it does make you wonder, is all this harmless fun? Or is there a darker side to this whole infantilization thing?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And the source actually goes into some of the marketing strategies that companies are using to kind of exploit these desires, to make a profit.
Yeah, they talk about how marketers are really good at tapping into our nostalgia, like when they reboot some old cartoon from your childhood and suddenly you're buying all the merch.
Exactly. They know how to push those buttons, trigger those happy memories to make you feel like a kid again, and open up your wallet.
It's so true. It's like that time I saw an ad for those
Yeah.
host speaker. Trails off. Thought, well, never mind. I almost bought it right then and there.
It's powerful stuff.
Yeah.
And the source also talks about how marketers are really capitalizing on the aging population's desire to stay youthful. All those anti-aging creams and cosmetic surgeries and stuff.
It's like they're selling the fountain of youth in a bottle.
Yeah.
But is it really empowering, or is it just preying on people's insecurities?
That's a tough one. I mean, on the one hand, people should have the freedom to do what they want with their bodies and their money, right? But it's hard to ignore the fact that a lot of these marketing tactics really play on our deepest fears about getting older and becoming irrelevant.
It's like we're constantly being told that we're not good enough as we are,
Yeah.
that we need to buy all this stuff to be happy and accepted. And it's not just about looks either. It's about this whole idea of staying young and relevant in a culture that worships youth.
Yeah, that's a really important point. And it ties into this larger concern about how this focus on youth and instant gratification might be impacting our ability to deal with, serious issues like the big challenges facing society today.
The source makes a really interesting argument about this. They basically say that a society that's addicted to instant gratification might not be equipped to handle problems that require long-term thinking and sacrifice, like climate change, for example.
Right. It's like we're so focused on staying in this perpetual state of adolescence that we don't develop the maturity and resilience we need to deal with the tough stuff.
But is that a fair assessment? I mean, aren't there some positive aspects to this cultural shift, too? We don't want to become a society of humorless, rigid adults.
Of course not. And the source does acknowledge that there are some potential benefits to this more playful, less hierarchical approach to life. Like, think about all the potential for creativity and innovation, and even apathy.
Yeah, so maybe it's not about, getting rid of that playfulness altogether, but more about finding a balance.
Mm.
Like, can we hold on to that sense of wonder and still be adults? Still engage with the world's problems in a mature way.
That's the real challenge, isn't it? It's like walking a tightrope between those two extremes. I think we need to be aware of how this infantilization trend is shaping us and then make conscious choices about how we want to engage with it.
Right, because if you're not even aware of it, how can we possibly, push back
Yeah.
against all those forces that are encouraging us to stay in this perpetual state of adolescence?
Exactly. And that awareness starts with really understanding what's going on, like recognizing how consumerism and changing social structures and even our own psychology,
Yeah.
how all of that is feeding into this trend.
And once we understand it, maybe we can start making different choices.
Yeah.
Like choosing to be more critical consumers, questioning the messages we're being bombarded with, supporting businesses that actually align with our values.
It's also about recognizing the value of all generations. Like, instead of just dismissing older generations as irrelevant, we need to figure out how to tap into their wisdom and experience.
Because let's face it, the problems we're facing today are huge. We need everyone working together, young and old, if we're going to find solutions.
I couldn't agree more. A healthy society needs all kinds of perspectives.
So today we've been exploring this whole idea of societal infantilization. It's a pretty complex issue, with roots in consumerism, shifting social structures, and even our own psychology.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack. And we've seen how it's impacting everything from how we view aging to our ability to engage with the world around us.
But it's not all doom and gloom. By understanding these forces at play, we can start making more conscious choices about how we want to live our lives, how we consume, how we engage with the world.
And I think most importantly, we can start talking about it. you know? Having open and honest conversations about the challenges we're facing and working together to create a better future. A future where there's room for both playfulness and responsibility.
That's a great point. So here's a final thought for you all to ponder. If we really are stuck in this state of perpetual adolescence, what does that mean for the future? And how do we find that sweet spot, where we can embrace the joy and wonder of life, but still step up and meet the challenges ahead? It's something to think about for sure. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Come join the conversation on social media. Until next time, keep diving deep.